Hey, what is up, Chargers fans? What a rough day to be a fan of this franchise. We will talk about all of it, of course. Um, we being myself and Alex Katzen today, who I think might be frozen or I am frozen. If you can hear me in the chat, please let me know. Um, if you see Alex is frozen in the chat, please let me know. Are we good? Are we good in the chat? Please let us know. I don't know if I'm frozen. It looks like Alex is frozen. All right. Cool. Pretty on par for today, if you really think about it. So once Alex gets back in here, we'll have a chat about a lot of things today, I'm sure. It really sucks that this is how the season ended. There's no real way to jump around it. So I don't know really where we want to start today. Once, like I said, once Alex jumps in, we'll figure it out. But, Nate Tice had a great point. And I think they were talking about in the CBS game heading into today that you get to the playoffs based off of your strengths, and then you lose in the playoffs potentially because of your weaknesses. And I think, unfortunately, that showed up for the Chargers today. Ladd McConkey had 197 yards receiving, which broke the rookie record for a playoff game, which is great. Good for Ladd. Super excited for him. But the rest of the Chargers wide receiver room and tight end room just did not show up today. So Ladd had 197 yards receiving. The rest of the Chargers combined for 14 yards as a wide receiver. And then Will Dissly had 16 yards. Tucker Fisk had 15 yards. Which was probably the play of the day. So it looks like we got Alex back in here. But yeah, Alex, I was just saying, very on par for today. But, Nate Tice and some of the CBS guys heading into today, we're talking about, your weaknesses really show up in the playoffs. And that was very much magnified today. 2 drops from Will Dissly, even a drop from Ladd, which, again, he's not to blame. But 14 yards from the Chargers wide receivers not named Ladd McConkey. Just got completely bodied by Kamari Lassiter and Derek Stingley Jr. today in the worst way possible. So the Chargers had all of this positive momentum heading into the playoff game today on offense in particular. And then they put up their worst game of the season, I think, pretty comfortably. There are some other bad games, right? But some of that is like Herbert being injured and things like that. But 12 points today, 4 interceptions from Justin Herbert after having 3 the entire season. It sucks, but he's going to have to shoulder that for a long offseason ahead, from an offseason narrative standpoint. Guys like Emmanuel Acho and et cetera are going to have a heyday with that one, unfortunately. But I don't know where you want to start. But for me, I think this game just really put a big microscope on the Chargers' lack of playmakers, on basically every spot outside of Ladd McConkey.
Yeah, it's going to be a long spring and summer for Chargers fans, I think, with all the narratives about Justin Herbert. But I mean, obviously, it was not his best game. I think we can start there. It was not his best game. There were a lot of throws that I'm sure that he's going to want back when he goes back and watches the tape. That being said, I think that the point that you mentioned about like there being no weapons outside of Ladd McConkey is very important to hit on for this game in particular. The Texans came into this game ranked number 1 in the NFL in EPA per play allowed when targeted outside the hashes, because Derek Stingley Jr. and Kamari Lassiter have been playing at this level the entire season.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have no outside receivers, your only receiver option is Ladd McConkey, who's primarily working over the middle. I know that they've kicked him outside a little bit and had him work outside as a Z a little bit this season as well. But when your primary option is only over the middle and you continue to try to force the ball outside, there's not going to be a lot of room for you there. The Texans defense was not particularly strong over the middle of the field. They were, I think it was like 24th or 25th in EPA allowed when targeted over the middle of the field, especially on play action, where Justin Herbert performed very well this season. And that wasn't really part of the game plan for a lot of this game. And, understandably, like after a little while, you get into sort of a game state game, right? Where it's like, okay, you kind of have to take some more of those shots because you're losing, and you can't really establish the play action as much because the Texans aren't going to bite on the run fakes. And then, like even as early as like the second quarter, the run game was not necessarily working as much as they would have hoped for. But really, I thought that like the protection schemes for Herbert, the game plan to not work the middle of the field as much for Herbert, I really wasn't a fan of the way that they approached this Texans defense.
No.
That is to say, like, oh, this isn't Justin Herbert's fault. He played well. He just like, it just didn't happen for him. No, he played poorly. He had a bad game. But I think that also like when you have that sort of thing happening, you can't continue to go to the well of, okay, we just have to have this guy bail us out over and over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
Because even the most elite quarterbacks in the league, we've seen, like the Texans have done this to every quarterback in the league this season. They did this to Patrick Mahomes. They did this to Josh Allen. They did this to Lamar Jackson this season. You can go back and watch those games that they played against those three guys. They've done it to all of these guys. And so when you have that happen, you can't continue to just say like, well, we're just going to hope that Herbert can just produce a Justin Herbert throw and that'll get us back in the game. Like that throw over the middle to Lad McConkey was basically that, right? Like it's double coverage against cover 6. Like never a ball that you should be throwing, but also it's 3rd and 20 because you allowed 2 sacks on the first 2 downs. And then, Lad McConkey runs for an 86-yard touchdown, right? And so just from a game plan standpoint, I thought offensively the plan was not my favorite. I don't think that it was awful. Like I didn't think it was the worst game plan of the season necessarily, but it didn't feel like they adjusted well enough to Herbert not performing up to his usual standard, as well as sort of what they were getting from the Texans defense.
Yeah, I like the first couple of drives that they put together, and I think you saw like the intentionality that they wanted to come out today and play with heavier boxes and run the football. And I thought in the first 2 drives it looked pretty good. We're getting 4 yards from Dobbins to carry, 4 yards from Gus Edwards to carry, and it looked really good. And then the Texans had that 3rd drive and they came out and they had a couple run stops, and basically since that point it felt like it was just back to like what you were saying, traditional straight dropbacks, which is it's not this team's strengths. And Tyler and I, after the Buccaneers game, we did this whole thing about the offense and the structure of the traditional dropback game being the worst part of the offense, and that's all we saw today. And like you mentioned, this was a bad Greg Roman game combined with a bad Justin Herbert game, and this is what you get. Like you can't have both of those things happening at once. Some other teams that have higher end talent, like if the Eagles get a bad game from Jalen Hurts and a bad game from Kellen Moore, they have AJ Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert and the best offensive line in the league and Saquon Barkley that can make things right. The Chargers don't have that luxury from a roster. And so the last 3 weeks, we saw a lot of Justin Herbert being right. We saw a lot of Greg Roman being right, and the offense looked great. Today, both of them were not right. And so you have basically one source of offense, which is Lad McConkey, and he gets 197 yards, which is fantastic. Again, breaking the rookie record for a playoff game. But this was the worst possible time for those 2 guys to have their worst days of the season. And like comfortably Justin Herbert's worst game of his career. There's probably a couple from his rookie season that we can look back on, but of all of the ways I pictured the Chargers potentially losing today, a bad Justin Herbert game to this scale was not on my bingo card. It just was not. I did not think that coming off of the last month of the season, last 6 weeks of the season, really, that we would get this kind of game from Justin Herbert. And again, 2 of the 2 drops led to 2 interceptions. That's fine, but the box score says 4 picks. We have to talk about it that way. So it's awful timing from Justin Herbert. He's going to have to live with this for the next year. And unfortunately, this is kind of starting to feel very Lamar-esque for him, where Lamar has these great rookie seasons or great regular seasons, and then his first 2 playoffs games, he was very, very bad. And we can talk about, I don't want to revisit the Jacksonville game very much today, but the playoffs are a different beast, man. And like, you kind of have to go through stuff like this as a quarterback, as a team, in order to, eventually get over the hump. So I thought the Chargers would win today. But it was a bad Herbert day. It was a bad Greg Roman day. It was a bad interior offensive line day, which sucks extra because the defense I thought played incredible for about 85% of this game. So just frustrating watch, frustrating end to the season, frustrating time to think about all the offseason narratives. Just a lot of frustration right now.
Yeah, I think the Lamar Jackson comparison is a good one for the playoff performance. Coming into this weekend, actually, Lamar is going to, kick off in 10 minutes here if he hasn't already. But coming into this season, Lamar has the worst EPA per play of any quarterback in the playoffs the last 6 years, like overall in a career. I think also the performance that comes to mind, especially with the stat line, is in 2004, Peyton Manning in the AFC Championship game against the Patriots threw 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions with a completion percentage right around 48% as a 28-year-old.
Yeah.
And granted, that's in the AFC Championship and not in the wild card against the winner of the worst division in the AFC. But 2 years later, Peyton Manning comes back and he wins the Super Bowl with this Colts team. And obviously the Chargers have a lot of work to do in order to get the roster to a level that is, at that same point. But like, we've seen that Justin Herbert is a elite talent in this league. Like, I don't think that that's in question. I don't think that one bad game in the playoffs puts that in question.
Yeah.
And so if you want to look for things to be optimistic about, right, I think you can look at that pathway that Peyton Manning went through, right, where like Peyton Manning, I was 6 when this game happened, and it was in 2004, right? So like, I don't necessarily remember the full discourse, right? But like, in general, right, like the discourse around him coming into the playoffs post 2004 was basically like the same things that the Chargers are going to get this whole offseason about Justin Herbert. Of like, he's a great regular season quarterback, he's a great compiler, he has, like he's a great stats quarterback, but he can't win in the playoffs. He can't do it. And so now we're gonna have to see, right? Like this is, for a lot of quarterbacks, this is the turning point, right? Like, this is the point where you take this performance and it never leaves you. And for the rest of your career in the playoffs, you step up to the level that is required of you to win a playoff game. Because in Justin Herbert's first playoff game, remember, like, again, we don't want to talk about the Jacksonville game too much, right? But like, that game, like, there's not, other than just like the general collapse of it all, there's not that much to take away from that performance, right? Like, and that's why I think we don't necessarily want to talk about it that much, is because it's not necessarily relevant.
That was a coaching thing,
right?
Like,
right. It was a coaching failure. Like there was so much other stuff going on that wasn't like, you can't take away something from it as a player and be like, okay, like, this is what we have to do going forward. But with this game, I think that there are very clear takeaways to have as a player, right? Like, I think Justin Herbert's like lack of improvisation in this game show, right? Like there was a desire to continue peppering the targets that are the reads on the play rather than extend the play, scramble. I know a lot of people in the chat already have mentioned that like Herbert hardly ran at all today. I do think that part of that has to do with the fact that like the Texans did a really good job packing the interior of the defensive line, and Herbert, generally speaking, prefers to run between the tackles if he is going to scramble. He doesn't.
Yeah, he's not a like escape
out of the pocket a lot, and so like those opportunities were a little bit more limited for him. But again, right, and like I think it was Benjamin Solak tweeted out after the Quinton play on 4th down, right, where like it's a classic Justin Herbert thing to do, to throw a like trust ball to a receiver that's struggling, right?
To the right spot technically, but
right. Like, it's to the right spot technically, and it's a trust ball to his receiver that's struggling to show that he still trusts him, right?
Yeah.
And he did that with QJ all game. He did that with Will Dissly all game. Even after the first drop, like wiped out a touchdown. And then on the second drop, it turns into a pick 6, right? And so there are things that Justin Herbert can take away from this game and say like, okay, maybe I need to be a little bit more cutthroat about like, if a guy is struggling in a game, it's just not his week. I don't have to go back. Like, it doesn't mean I'm going to freeze him out for the rest of the year. I'll go back next week, but this is not the week for him, clearly. maybe there's a little bit more where it's like, escaping outside of the pocket needs to become a little bit more of his game, especially if the issues with the offensive line persist the way that they did this season. And so I think there's things to learn, right? And so in that respect, if you're looking for things to be optimistic about going forward, this is a good learning experience for Justin Herbert. Does it hurt right now? Of course. It sucks. It's a horrible game. It's a terrible game. But I do want to pivot to the defense because I think the defense played super well today.
Yeah, I think that's fair. The last thing I will say about Herbert is we have the unfortunate reality as Chargers fans of looking at 15 in Kansas City twice a year and seeing like what he does in the playoffs. That's not normal. Like for 95% of these quarterbacks who are franchise quarterbacks, you have to go through games like this. But yeah, it 100% sucks to see this kind of performance. It, like I said, if we were having this conversation and he played well today and they lost by a field goal, I think we're having a different conversation, right? But he played poorly today, and Justin Herbert is going to have to own that. And we're going to have to own that as Chargers fans that he played poorly today. I don't think we as Chargers fans need to kind of do the whole like franchise quarterback thing. After this kind of loss, he had a rough day. The Chargers don't have enough around him to elevate a rough day of Justin Herbert. If you're sitting here questioning if Justin Herbert can win a Super Bowl with this team, if you're questioning if he is a franchise quarterback, I think you're having the wrong conversations today. You don't have to redo the entire Justin Herbert narrative because of what happened this afternoon in Houston. It was a bad day. Quarterbacks have bad days. Lamar Jackson has had very poor playoff games. Even Patrick Mahomes has had poor playoff games. Joe Burrow has had poor playoff games. Josh Allen has had poor playoff games. It happens. It's about how you respond. Yes, Justin Herbert needs to own it today, and he will because he is Justin Herbert. If you as a Chargers fan are questioning his long-term ability, I think we're having the wrong conversations, because I think we have seen enough over the last 4 or 5 years of Justin Herbert to know that for the most part, he is going to make the Chargers right. For the most part, he is a quarterback who can elevate those around him. But today was not one of those days. I think it is that simple. I think he very clearly is a franchise quarterback. We've seen him at his best be a legitimate MVP candidate, or put up MVP numbers at least. And, these people out here throwing everything at Justin Herbert, I get it. It's part of the beast of playing quarterback in the National Football League. But I don't think we as Chargers fans need to have this, sky is falling conversation around Justin Herbert today.
Yep, totally.
Getting to the defense, I do want to give a lot of credit to the way that they played today. Heading into this game, I think outside of that last drive, the defense played basically as good of a game as we could have all possibly imagined. It sucks that the Derwin James interception did not count, that he was not able to survive the ground. But you get 3 turnovers, 3 sacks from Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa. The combination of those 2 edge rushers played fantastic today. Poona Ford, Tier Tart played really well. We didn't get the best cornerback performance, from Tari still, Christian Fulton and Cam Hart. Obviously, Cam Hart's hurt again, which sucks. But we got a lot of positive from this Chargers defense, which I think it just kind of sucks. It adds to the frustration that the Chargers offense was not able to capitalize today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this was one of the best games from the safety room as a whole.
Yeah, dude. Alohi was awesome today.
Alohi was awesome. Tony Jefferson continued to just make plays out there. Derwin, I thought, was awesome. Obviously, fumble recovery and had almost interception. But yeah, forcing 3 turnovers against this offense. Obviously, the Texans offense has struggled this season, but still, forcing 3 turnovers against an offense of CJ Stroud and Nico Collins and Joe Mixon, that's no easy feat. The defense played well. I thought Tier Tart especially had Titus Howard in hell.
Yeah.
he was whooping that guy. And there's obviously going to be some conversations that we get into now that we've hit the offseason, right? Where Poona Ford is a free agent. Tart is a free agent. Tony Jefferson, I guess, technically is a free agent also. Christian Fulton is a free agent. Obviously, we saw Cam Hart leave with another injury, right? That looked like I saw some people talking about like, oh, it's his third or fourth concussion. Technically, this time it was a shoulder injury. It's not a concussion.
Yeah, initially he
But
was
also
holding
it
his
was,
wrist.
yeah.
I
So
was
it looked
confused
like to
there.
me like it looked to me like it probably was a stinger of some sort because it
Mhm.
was like helmet to helmet, and then he came up grabbing his arm. And so I
Yeah,
think that he probably like his arm probably went numb a little bit, and then they
yeah,
called it a shoulder. Um, but either way, right? Like there's a lot of questions to answer for this defense going forward, right? But I think if you just want to talk about what they did today, I thought they played great. And the fact that they gave up 32 points in the box score at the end of the game, I think really understates the way that they played today. Because again, like we talked about with the offense, right? Just like some of the game state stuff, like the field position, and obviously once the offense starts turning the ball over, then the defenses get put in terrible positions, right? And so some of the game state stuff just is not favorable to the way that the defense played on paper. But I think based on, what happened in the game, I thought that like it was a huge individual performance from a bunch of guys. It was a huge team performance. And, up until midway through the third quarter, like the only reason that the Chargers were in the game after a certain point was because the defense continued to get
yeah,
stopped and
yeah.
continued to turn the ball over and continued to give the Chargers offense more and more chances. And so, like I'm stoked because for whatever reason, Jesse Minter has not gotten a single head coaching interview request yet.
Wild to me, man.
And so, which is crazy and runs completely counter to everything that I heard for the last 2 months about what this coaching cycle was going to look like. But for Chargers fans, it's great because it means that
Yeah,
he's going to be back next year and this defense is going to be back. The structure of what this defense looks like is going to be the same. And I think a lot of the talent is going to be the same as well. A lot of the core talent, at least, right? And I think that gives you a lot of optimism for what this team can produce next season.
yeah. I think the defense, you feel very, very good about the direction of where they're heading, and I think we can have a conversation about the offense, right? But the defense is going to have some questions, but it's kind of just going to be very similar to like the Ryan Ficken conversation, where I'm just like, whatever Ryan Fick, whatever Jesse Minter wants, like he can have. If he wants a different edge room, great. Like all due respect to Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack, if they feel like they need to move on from both those guys, I'm just gonna kind of trust it, right? Like I
Right.
hope that Khalil Mack is back at least. I would love to see that part. But with the defense, really is not missing that much. Like they're gonna have some contracts that they'll have to figure out, but I think they need a legit CB1, and that's like about it. Like they could run this entire group back, figure out a different CB1 type, and I think that's a really good defense heading into next season again. Contractually, again, they'll have to figure out the edge rusher room. They'll have to figure out some of the safeties. Elijah Molden's a free agent, and he was awesome this season. Um, but we look at the offense, and we're having a very different conversation about where their needs are. On the defensive side of things, they need a legit CB1. They need a pass rushing defensive tackle. But if they just wanted to run this thing back on defense, I would get it. And I would have full confidence that they would be a good defense again next year. Some things about repeating defensive success is a little tricky. But this defense overperformed at such an incredibly high level. I would not blame them at all if they wanted to just simply run it back.
Yeah, and I think I had a couple of conversations with some people before hopping on here about like this Chargers defense really outperformed the level of talent that they had this season.
Yeah.
Like obviously, right, like Derwin James, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa aside, right? Deion Henley breakout season aside, right? Like a lot of the talent on this team is like guys that they brought in on 1-year deals as like flyers, guys
Yeah.
that were drafted lower in the draft, guys that they signed off the street, guys that they signed out of the Ravens scouting department. Like there's a bunch of guys that they brought in that like on paper, this Chargers defense should not have been expected to be the number one scoring defense in the league. And they should not have been expected to play this well going into this game, right? Like in general, right? And so I think that that gives you a lot of optimism, right? Because if Jesse Minter comes back, like you said, like carte blanche, right? Do whatever you want. I will trust you, right? If you say like Cam Hart and Tariq still are good enough to be the two starting corners next year, sure, man, let's do it.
Yeah.
If if you like, I think the only other thing, right, that I would probably mention is like you might want to do something about linebacker just because like the Perryman's stretched down the end of the season, right? Like I think the run defense really struggled with him out of the game. Obviously, you're hoping that you get sort of a step forward from Junior Colson in year 2 to kind of mitigate that next season. I thought Troy Dye honestly played pretty well in relief over these last like 7 or 8 weeks as well. But, that would be the only other thing that I would say is like maybe they want to add one more linebacker outside of Henley if they're not super confident about what Perryman's health looks like or what Colson's development looks like going forward. But otherwise, yeah, like this defense is ready-made. They're ready to do it. Like it's just like, as we've talked about with the Chargers for what feels like the last 3 or 4 years, like the whole time I've covered them, it's just about marrying both sides of the ball and getting both sides of the ball to work in concert for a full 17-game season and playoff stretch. And they have not been able to do that, and they continue to not be able to do that, but they're getting closer.
Yeah, the difference is that we previously have seen a top 5 offense for the Chargers, and this year we had a, probably top 17 offense, we'll say. So yeah, it's going to be a very interesting offseason, man. They have a lot of cap space. They could very easily get to $100 million in cap space if they really wanted to. They have 10 or 11 draft picks, depending on how the compensatory situation works out. Heading into today, heading into this recording, like I was talking with Brooke after the game was kind of winding down, and there was a lot of conflict, right? Like, because a week ago on this channel, we were talking about like the direction of this franchise being so incredibly positive, and they won 11 games, and they weren't supposed to be this good on defense, and we're talking about that again today. But that game was so frustrating to watch, man. And I'm just sitting here going, like, you're questioning everything as a fan that this team does for the whole season. And then this is why we do this kind of podcast, right? Like we sit down and this is one of the reasons why I love talking football with you, because you have this ability to kind of take a step back and look at the whole picture. And hopefully you guys can feel a little bit better about at least the direction of this team. I understand that as football fans, we can be a little existential crisis after a moment like this. And I myself was feeling that way about 45 minutes ago. But I still think you can take a step back and trust that the direction of this franchise is going to make sense. Are there needs? Yes. Does this team have to invest more in the offense? Yes, 100%. But I don't think that has to take away from what Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz were able to accomplish this season, as frustrating it is right now to avoid that. And if you want to do the existential crisis thing, go ahead, man. Like, I totally understand it. Like, that game sucked. And I kind of was planning on doing that, but Alex Katzen is here for a reason, and thankfully he is. Otherwise, that this would be a very different show today.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think I tweeted this out towards the end of the game too, right? But I think like the important thing to remember about this entire season, right, is that like this team is so far ahead of schedule for what we thought it was going to look like in the preseason. I know a lot of Chargers fans, like in the community, thought that like they were just going to immediately be a Super Bowl contender because they got Jim Harbaugh, right? But like, if you go back and you watch like the shows that you and Tyler did preseason, or like any of the stuff that I wrote preseason, we were talking about like 8 or 9 wins would be a successful year. Like, I'm good with making the playoffs at all, right? and they did that, and they won 11 games, and they were the number 5 seed with a team that, again, as we've talked about, really outperformed the level of talent that they had on the squad. And so going forward, right, I think you have to be optimistic about the direction and the vision, right? Because they are ahead of this team won 5 games last year, and they're the number 5 seed in the AFC this year, right? Like, that part of it, I think, is the part that I try to cling to, right? And like, I'll be completely transparent, right? Like 45 minutes ago, when Will Dissly drops that pass and it lands in Eric Murray's hands and he returns it for a pick 6, I'm yelling at my television.
Oh yeah, dude, I'm so depressed.
I'm in my house, like by myself, just like stomping around my living room, furious, right?
Yeah.
Because like, it's a horrible game, and it like, I'm so mad about this outcome because, like, it seemed like a game that the Chargers should be able to win. The Texans were not a good team all year. Like, it really seemed like it was like, all right, sweet, we're gonna do it divisional round next week. I was already like telling one of my friends' birthdays is next week, and I was already telling them, I was like, I don't know if I can come to your party because it might conflict with a work.
Dude, I was looking at plane tickets to Kansas City like yesterday.
Yeah, right. And I was just like, yeah, like, I don't know, I might not be able to come. And then like the game ended, and immediately I was just like, well, on the bright side, I can come to your birthday party. Like, like, I get it. It sucks. It's horrible, right? It's awful, right? But again, if you think about where we thought this team was going to be at this point 3 months ago, 4 months ago, right at the beginning of the season, like, they're ahead of schedule. And so I think in that respect, you can feel good about what it looks like this offseason. There's a lot of work to do, of course, right? And like, they're going to need to use that $100 million in cap space in free agency. They're going to need another Joe Ortiz draft class like they got this year in order to take that next step forward. They're going to need all of those things. But I think that you can be a little bit more confident than we were after the Jaguars loss 2 years ago, that you're going to get those things this offseason. And I think in that respect, everything is okay.
Yeah. I think again we're probably going to take the rest of the week off from this show, but I think this kind of tone is definitely the right one to have about this team as a whole. Jim Harbaugh saying afterwards that this was his favorite team to coach. It's probably coach speak a little bit, but this team was genuinely a very fun team to cover, man. Like, there were a lot of positive developments. There are definitely some things that this team has to address. Just kind of putting a bow on this game. This game really flipped when CJ Stroud, had that scramble after the drop snap, and then he converts to what's the guy's name from Hutchinson from West Virginia, right? So that game flipped on its head, and the Chargers just were never able to get anything back after that point. It just felt like they were climbing uphill. So they get that conversion, and then it's 99-yard drive and a touchdown, and then quick 3 and out. Texans come back in a field goal, and it just felt like everything was uphill after that point. So the Chargers, the one thing I will going forward, they need to do a much better job of trying to make things happen to get the momentum back on offense specifically. The defense made some plays, obviously, in the second half to try and get that back. But looking back at the whole rest of this, the whole season, whenever the Chargers were not able to get in a rhythm on offense, this is what it looked like, in the Steelers game, in the Chiefs game, in the Falcons game, in the Cardinals game. They were never really able to kind of get out of their own way at times. And so, again, some of that is going to be personnel, some of that is coaching, but that reared its ugly head today. Their success rate is probably going to be incredibly low because they just were never able to get anything going outside of those first 3 drives-ish or so. And I think that's really kind of the tone of the day. And for all of you who talk shit on Joshua Palmer, man, he would have helped a lot today. The Chargers, again, 14 yards from the non-Lad McConkey wide receivers. Even if Joshua Palmer had given you 45 yards, it would have helped, man. It really would have. They needed that other guy today in a way that they did not have without him.
Yeah. First of all, free my dog. I love Joshua. Second of all, yeah, again, it goes back to the conversation, right, about like, this team is not built to come back if they lose a lead or if they don't have a lead going into the second half, because, as we've talked about at length, right, they just don't have the playmakers. There's just not the playmakers on offense outside of Lad McConkey to do it, right? Like, we got a few games of that from Will Dissly. Obviously today, not the case in the slightest.
He's still got a career high receiving yards from Will Dissly, man.
Yeah, and so good season by Will Dissly. Not a great game for him today.
No.
And so, right, again, like, going into this offseason, like, that has to be a priority, right? You have to add playmakers that can turn the momentum for you, right? Like, CJ Stroud, like, he hits that throw to Xavier Hutchinson, right, which is a guy that they drafted in the 6th round or something, right? Like, that's that part a little bit notwithstanding, right? But like, the way that Nico Collins came out in the second half for the Texans, the way that Joe Mixon came out in the second half, right? Like, that's the type of playmaker, that's the caliber of player that the Chargers need to find in order to continue. And they got a little bit about a little bit of that with that McConkey touchdown, right? Like it was a little bit too little too late, but I think that you see, right, that McConkey is taking strides towards being that player, but he can't be the only one, right? And so you have to add something around him, whether or not that's T. Higgins in free agency or an early pick at tight end or wide receiver that's going to add to this offense, or both, or neither, right? And like you have to find something somewhere, right, that's going to be that guy for you. Like I love J.K. Dobbins and I love the season that he had, right? But like I don't know if he's necessarily coming into this week banged up a little bit, that caliber of playmaker for them, right? Like Joshua Palmer, again, like 45 yards would have helped, right? But like he's not necessarily that caliber of playmaker in the Tide for them, right? Like, and so that's like, for me, that's a huge focus of this offseason. And then obviously the interior of the offensive line is a huge focus of this offseason. You have to do a better job, especially as we talked about, like if you want to unlock some of Herbert's improvisational skills, he wants to be running between the tackles. He doesn't want to be flushing out of the pocket and moving outside like to the hashes. And so you have to improve the interior of the offensive line to open up some of those lanes. That's a lot. That's a tall order, right? And so, we'll have to see whether or not they can fix all of that in one off season, right? Yeah. I think too, the other thing that I was thinking about with this conversation about Herbert, right, is that like I think that there is a legitimate conversation to be had if you want to criticize Justin Herbert, right? I think there's a legitimate conversation to be had about the fact that like his ability to change things before the snap and to like slide protections and do whatever before the snap, I think is still a developing trait of his. And I think that there's a very specific reason for that, which is that up until midway through last season, the Chargers had Corey Linsley on the roster.
Yeah.
And now they don't.
Yeah.
And so, like it's it's been 15 months or something, right? And like the first 6 months of that was Herbert learning how to do that in an offensive system that they're no longer using on the fly in the middle of the year with Will Clapp and then with Brendan Hymas once Clapp got injured as well, right? And so like this year is really the first full year that all of that has been put on his plate, right? Like, and you can't, that's a tall order. That's a lot to put on a guy, right?
Yeah.
In addition to learning another new offensive system, which is the third one of his career, if not fourth one at this point, right? Like there's a lot of other stuff that goes into that, and it's a complicated thing to do. And so do you look at like a veteran center, right? Like a Ryan Kelly that's going to be available in free agency to maybe take a little bit of that off his plate and have him be a little bit more fluid, I guess, in that way, right? Where he doesn't necessarily have to be handling all of this in addition to being asked to carry the entire offense because there's no playmakers on the team.
Yeah. I am 100% in favor of Ryan Kelly signing on this team. I think it's just going to be Bradley Bozeman coming back, honestly. I know that's not what any of us want to hear. I don't like saying that out loud. All due respect to him, he seems like a great individual. But yeah, man, the way that this team talks about him, I think he's probably coming back next year. Yeah, I do expect the Chargers to be very aggressive on offense in free agency at certain positions. You look at the right guard position in general, there are a lot of names out there, and we're going to talk about this for a long time. But there's Trey Smith, there's Kevin Zeitler, Ben Bredesen for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers has been good. There's Austin Corbett from the Panthers, who's played center and guard, could do both of those. There's a lot of names at guard. There's not very many names at wide receiver. There's T. Higgins, and then you're talking about Darius Slayton, who would be a tremendous help to this team. I think that's probably where the Chargers would end up.
Yeah.
But if Trey Smith hits free agency, man, you throw him a massive bag, and then you kind of figure out the rest of the offseason elsewhere. And I think he's just like, he's top 10 in run block win rate. He was potential all-pro this year. Like that's a game-changing thing for the Chargers up front. And then you can talk about solving left guard next year, after the offseason of 2026, after Zion's contract comes up. So again, a lot of offseason to go here, but I expect the Chargers to spend at right guard. I would expect them to potentially spend, a long defensive tackle and, seeing what they can potentially get there from a pass rushing standpoint. I think Chargers fans will be upset that T. Higgins probably just ends up back in Cincinnati, but I get it. The last thing I have to say about this wide receiver, I am begging Chargers fans to stop doubting Lad McConkey. And I know you guys here in the chat today, you are probably not the ones who are doing this, but there are people online, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, saying that the Chargers do not have a wide receiver one. What if the Chargers had drafted Malik Neighbors instead? I'm so done with that shit. Lad McConkey had 197 yards receiving today. He had 1,100 yards as a rookie. He broke Odell Beckham Jr.'s record for most games in a row over 50 yards. He broke Keenan Allen's reception rookie record for the franchise, yards record for the franchise. Stop doubting Lad McConkey. I am begging you to stop having that kind of conversation. If you don't think that he is a wide receiver one in this league, we are not watching the same player. Plain and simple. We have not watched Lad McConkey at the same time, because if that is your takeaway, I don't know how to help you. Lad is a Wes Welker. Get the fuck out of here. No. Lad McConkey is a legit wide receiver one in this league, and I will die on this hill that he is one of the best receivers that we have seen come in as a Chargers fans. If you're labeling him as a Wes Welker, you are disrespecting Lad McConkey. Top 5 slot, fuck out of here. I don't care. Lad McConkey can absolutely be a wide receiver one in this team. The Chargers 1000% need more from their tight end room and need more from their wide receiver room. But Lad McConkey is absolutely a wide receiver one in this league. And you can talk to me about T. Higgins all you want. You know who had a better season than T. Higgins this year? Lad McConkey. So put some respect on my guy's name. The Chargers can build the rest of the room around him, but stop bringing that shit to me with Lad McConkey, please.
Yeah, there's been, I think it was Dane Brugler tweeted out, it was either earlier today or sometime last week, that a lot of teams even, right, slapped the slot only label on McConkey coming out of the draft last season. And Brugler's tweet was like, yeah, I think a lot of people are probably second guessing that now. And even we talked about it a little bit before, right? Of he's primarily done his damage out of the slot, but I think the contested catch stuff, the stuff that he's done outside this season, has been more than even I expected we were going to get out of him. I think that we were expecting Lad McConkey when he got drafted to be a very high ceiling wide receiver 2, as a guy that could operate out of the slot and keep the offense on track. And immediately all of those notions have been upgraded to this. Someone mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown and the way that he operates in the Lions offense. And I think that that's closer to where I land in terms of Amon-Ra St. Brown is the wide receiver one for the Lions, but he is still working primarily out of the slot and primarily giving you the stuff over the middle, right? And every now and then he'll give you the contested catch stuff. He'll give you stuff on the outside. He can do that, right? I think that is the caliber of player that we're looking at this point. And the idea, right, that oh, this team needs a true wide receiver one. They have that already. They have that squared away. It doesn't look like a prototypical traditional wide receiver one. And I think that's why people are still saying that, right? People are still getting a little bit confused about that. And I agree. They need a true outside receiver that can, that is a contested catch merchant, for lack of a better word, right? That is their specialty. They need the Mike Williams to the Keenan Allen, right? They need that for sure. But they don't need a wide receiver one. They have that. That's Lad McConkey.
Yeah. My guy had 5.2 yards per route run today in a playoff game, in his first playoff game. And a lot of the action today was against Derek Stingley Jr., by the way. So please, I'm begging you to stop having that kind of conversation. Lad McConkey also runs a 4.3. So if you're doubting his juice, I don't know what kind of player we're watching. Okay, that's it for me. Alex, do you have any other takeaways today from this game before we get to some of these super chats?
A lot of people were very excited to see me because I'm the draft guy and the season is over now. Holiday break ends this week. The show will be up this week. We'll do a mock draft or something to christen the off season. But yeah, I think if you're looking at okay, this team needs a weapon. They're not, if we say they're not going to get T. Higgins is probably going to resign. They need a weapon. Easiest place to get that is going to be in the first round, right? Of course, naturally. I think that given where the Chargers are going to pick, it's going to be around, I guess, 20-ish, right? like with the wild card loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, because 14 teams make the playoffs.
They'll be ahead of
6 of
obviously
them
the
will lose.
Steelers and the Broncos when they lose, but
Yeah.
or
So
behind, I
yeah, so
guess.
around like 20, 21-ish, basically like where they took QJ, essentially.
Yeah.
Is going to be roughly where the range is going to be.
Yeah.
So early 20s. I think that the issue that you're going to run into in the first round, if you're looking for a wide receiver specifically, there isn't one at 21, 22-ish this year. There isn't really going to be one unless someone like completely destroys the pre-draft cycle. I am not expecting one to be available around that pick. I think that you're going to see a couple of guys go pretty high, like Tet McMillan and Luther Burden will go top 15 or so. And then there'll be kind of a drought until the second round or so when we get kind of the run on the next guys. But if you would like a tight end,
it's a good tight end class.
It's going to be a great place to get it, and it's a great tight end class. I think Tyler Warren will probably be a little bit more expensive than the Chargers are going to be available to bid for in terms of draft capital. I would expect him to go top 15 as well. But Colston Loveland will be in that range. You may get sniped a pick or two ahead of the Chargers, but I would expect him to be in conversations. I still like Gunnar Helm. I don't necessarily think he's going to be a first-round player at this point, so that might be a second-round guy. There's going to be some guys. This tight end class is super good and super deep, and so there's going to be some guys in the second, third, fourth round that you're going to be able to grab in that range to get. Wide receiver, again, is pretty deep across the board once you get out of that drought into the second round. I think there'll be some good guys available rounds 2, 3, 4. But I think kind of the sleeper position at this point to keep an eye on for the first round is going to be defensive tackle. This defensive tackle class at the back end of the first round is loaded. You can look at Kenneth Grant at Michigan, obviously the Harbaugh connection there. Deion Walker at Kentucky is a great one that I've covered earlier this season. Walter Nolan will be sort of in that range. Derek Harmon out at Oregon will be in that range. And so I think if they don't necessarily spend a ton at defensive tackle in free agency, I think that's kind of a sleeper position that they could go in the first round just with the way the board is going to fall. And then rounds 2, 3, 4, you're going to be able to get wide receivers, tight ends, corners. Not really a ton of corners that I love at 21-ish either. I think, again, that's going to kind of be like top of the draft and then second round sort of stuff. Maybe a couple guys that sneak in there to the 20s, but I think you feel good generally about where they sit in terms of like where the talent is in this draft class. A lot of the talent in the class is where the Chargers need talent on the roster. And so that is a very good thing to have. And so I think, we'll get into it more over the next few weeks. I'm getting on a plane 2 weeks from now, go down to the Shrine Bowl, go down to the Senior Bowl. I will be doing all that live coverage. Maybe we'll even get a video from down there. We'll see how the week works out, but there'll be plenty of intel to be had. There'll be plenty of players to discover. And I think that like I said, brief overlook of the draft class as it stands right now. I think a lot of the talent in the class is in a lot of the positions that the Chargers need going into this offseason.
Yeah, I think if Colston Loveland is on the board, I think we can pencil him in at this point. But a lot can happen. There are several teams that will be picking ahead of the Chargers that do need tight ends. Obviously, the Colts, kind of everybody in the draft world is linking them to Tyler Warren. The Broncos could use a tight end as well. There are some other teams, so we'll see. I would also throw edge rusher into that conversation. Even
back end of the first round is going to be a good place for that too. I think second round, third round, I like the edge class as well. I like a lot of the guys that are projected to go day 2. You and I have texted a little bit about Mike Green at Marshall. He's a great one for, I think, back end of the first round that we'll talk about, I'm sure, over this offseason. But
dude, those 3 games I watched of Mike Green, man, they were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun, and one of them was against Ohio State. So, he's a fun player. But I think the Chargers could get. I mentioned right guard. I think defensive tackle is a position where they could really find some upgrades if they want to as well. Milton Williams, Osa Odighizuwa, those are guys who are going to be free agents this year. Both of those 2 teams could, the Cowboys and the Eagles could prioritize those guys. But if one of those guys hits free agency, I would love to see that happen. So that might not be a need. And I think they could easily afford to bring back Puna Ford and Tier Tart as well. So again, lot to cover there. We'll get to some of these super chats and we'll head out. We got 28 of them already. Greatly appreciate it. And we'll dive in with the first one from Mr. Sarl. He says, well, that was horrible. Thanks for a good season, guys. It was horrible. Again, this podcast went very differently than I thought it was going to go, but the game, there's no way around it. The game was definitely horrible. Next one in here from Steven Nava. We were never winning the Super Bowl this year. At least now we have a better pick.
Certainly one way to look at it.
Yeah.
You know, a couple spots higher than it would be if we made it to the divisional round. So, you know, feel good about that.
Sure. Yeah. Optimism, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, let's do it.
Leah Smith, thank you very much for the coverage all season. I guess that could be Leah. Apologies either way if I mispronounced there. I appreciate you guys. We appreciate you, Leah. She's in here quite often with Super Chats, so that means a lot to us. GE thinks that Khalil Mack is walking and Bosa is retiring. I should never have doubted the GOAT, Iron Eagle, but he said Khalil Mack his entire career, and it has always bugged me. But apparently that is how you say it. He asked Khalil Mack, and Khalil Mack said that that's how you say it. So if that is true, I apologize, Ian, and I apologize, Khalil. It's going to take some getting used to, but apparently that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, you know, as far as him walking, I think that they have a pretty good shot at bringing him back if they want to, which I think that they should.
Yeah, Bosa, there's a chance that he's back on the team, but his contract it's not tenable. Like the Chargers have to move on in some capacity.
Yeah. There has to be something done about it. He can't make $25 million next season.
Yeah. Well, let me make sure I get this right. As it currently stands, he is going to have a cap hit of $36 million this next season, which is second highest on the team. So the Chargers cutting him saves them $25 million. They can't restructure him, obviously, because he's on the last year of his contract.
Yeah.
If they wanted to extend him, they could. But to me, it just makes the most sense to cut him. And then they can kind of do the Mike Williams thing where, like, hey, man, like, you can go see if you want to go play with your brother or, like, go do whatever in free agency. And then if you still want to come back, like, we can have that conversation. But he's not going to play on his current contract. Like, it does not make any sense for anybody. He's not a player worth a $36 million cap hit at this point in his career. That doesn't mean he's useless. And I know a lot of Chargers fans hate Joey Bosa right now, but he's still a good player. I just think that there's really a very slim chance that he is back on his team, in my opinion.
Yeah. I think no matter how you slice it, it is Thule time in 2025.
Yes. I would love to see an edge room of Thule and Khalil, as your starters. Bud Dupree is still technically on the roster, so he can at least play the run for you in 2025. And then you add some speed juice into this room. You know, we talked about Mike Green, obviously. There's a lot of potential edge rushers there. I think Michael Pierce might be long gone at that point, but that kind of profile would be great with this team because then you could have some speed off the edge in certain moments. And, and that young player wouldn't have to play the run a ton because, you have Thule and Khalil and Bud to play the run. They could just kind of be a DPR. I think that would be a great fit for that individual.
Yep. Add some speed to the room. I completely agree.
Rick says, fire Jim. He isn't the future. Roman is asked. That won't be fired. Minter will be a head coach next year. Then what does Jim have to offer? Hire Ben Johnson. Wow. What a take.
Sure, man. We talked about Minter a little bit. He hasn't gotten requested for a head coaching interview anywhere, so I don't know where you're expecting him to be a head coach next year. Maybe Michigan, I guess. I don't know where you're expecting that to be, but that, if you have any information about where he's interviewing, that would be good for me to track because I don't have any of that. So I do agree though that Roman won't get fired. I think that it will be
That's
Greg
the
Roman
one smart thing he said in that conversation.
Yeah, I think it will be Roman again in 2025. I think that both coordinators will probably be back for the Chargers, and in a very long-term sort of sense, I agree that I guess Jim Harbaugh is in the future because he is 60-ish, 65,
63.
Yeah, getting close to AARP age. But for the short term, I think that he's done a plenty fine enough job to be the future.
He is 61.
Okay, yeah, so 4 more years.
Yeah. I mean, Jim has never been a guy to stick around forever at one spot, although he does say that he is going to coach until he dies. That's the thing that he has
I
said out
believe
loud
that.
several times. But I guess that depends on how long your definition of future is. But no,
Right.
no, he's going to be the coach for as long as he wants. That part is crazy. Minter not getting an interview is crazy to me, but I'm very glad that he will be sticking around. Do you think they'll change anything on the coaching staff? Like, do you think any position coaches might be in danger or anything like that?
I don't know about in danger necessarily. I guess like maybe they make a change at like pass game coordinator or
Mm,
something like that. Or like, like something like kind of lower level, like quarterbacks coach or something.
yeah,
But I wouldn't expect a ton of changes on the staff, honestly. I think
yeah.
that again, big picture wise, taking a 5-win team and turning it into an 11-win team that got the number 5 seed, I don't necessarily think that a lot of guys are going to lose their job for doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's some lower level assistants that their contracts are probably up because
Yeah,
there
right.
were a few holdovers from Staley's staff, like Robert Muschamp is still on the staff. I forget his name right now, but the assistant offensive line coach is a
Oh,
holdover.
yeah.
So there are coaches like that might be changed over, but I definitely, am expecting the bulk of this coaching staff to stick around.
Yeah.
Some guy in here with a huge super chat. We greatly appreciate that. He says, thanks for doing this post game. Time to take stock, learn from this game season, and move forward with the offseason draft and next season. Yeah, we will definitely do all of that. Our offseason coverage, I think, really stands out personally. And Alex is part of that with his draft coverage. So we'll have all the free agency stuff, all the draft stuff, all the, everything like that you guys are looking forward to. We had 11,000 people on day 3 in the chat for the draft this year. So we're expecting a repeat and should be a ton of fun. But the good news is that we don't have to cover a coaching and a GM search like we did last year.
Finally,
So we're
man.
going to be able to put a lot more energy into the draft and free agency this year than we did last year, where
Yes.
at this time last year we were doing all kinds of profiles on 10 different GM candidates and 15 different coaching candidates. So that should be fun.
Yeah, every year that I've covered this team, except for this year, I've had to do a GM search, a head coach search, a coordinator search of some kind. I've had to leave practice in the middle of the day at Shrine Bowl the last 3 years in a row to go write a newser about the Chargers hiring somebody. Very glad to not have to do all that this year.
Yeah, I agree. I do not envy these people who are doing both this season. Some guy also pointed out that this was a Scorigami game.
Yes,
I did not know that.
We destroyed the Tetris piece on the Scorigami chart. There's always the whole time that the Scorigami chart has existed, there's been this little T Tetris piece in the chart that has a just like right at the 12 mark for the losing team. There's a little string that goes down, and we knocked out one of the squares today. So
that's cool. That's cool. That's an achievement, I guess.
Yeah, however you want, like optimism. Let's do it.
We are leaning in.
We're on the draft, baby.
Yes.
We're on memorialized forever.
This is the most copium podcast I think I've ever been a part of. But it's good. We need the cope. It's good. We appreciate some guy for jumping in here and again sending a huge super chat. Shoe, I'm gonna go with that. Thanks for being an amazing podcast, you guys. Rain or shine, hard to put into words, but the future with this team can be bright, even if it doesn't feel that way. I agree, and I think that's been kind of a common sentiment for us today. Landon, excuse me. Sumner, love you guys. Love this podcast. We'll be watching through the offseason. What do you guys think? What do you guys do to get over a loss like this? Because I don't drink. Do you drink?
Not socially. I don't drink by myself.
Okay. So, I mean, I think doing the podcast is part of this.
For sure.
But like, I'm going to go out to eat with my family and some friends after this. Like, that's a big thing. I think socializing for me is always kind of like a way for me to kind of get over things, because the Chargers are a very specific circle for me, and not many people that I interact with on a regular basis are a part of that circle. So you get outside, go do something fun, go see your friends, go see your family. That's kind of my general advice to get over a loss like this.
Yeah, I would say similar. Obviously, I live in an area of the country where there's not a ton of Chargers fans, given that I don't live in Southern California.
Yeah.
And so, I think that will definitely be a big part of it. I think just in general, just get out of your house any way you can. If the weather's good enough for you to get out of your house right now, I would recommend just like go take a walk or something if you don't have, people that are available to socialize, or if all your friends are also Chargers fans or something, and that like being around them is just going to turn into a yelling session about the game. Just like go take a walk, do something like that. I do a lot of that sort of stuff. You know, go treat yourself to a nice meal at your favorite restaurant. Sit down and eat at a restaurant instead of just like getting it delivered or getting takeout or something. Just like
Yeah.
sit at the table and be there for an hour.
And the good news is there's also another game, and then there's several games tomorrow that you can kind of
Yeah.
watch and not think about. So
Watch draft prospects. That's what I'm gonna do.
yeah, there you go. That's living large, in my opinion. Next one in here from Dylan. Thank you, Stephen, for speaking sense about Herbert. We appreciate that. Sholoman says that Dolphins fans are out in full force, which is so funny because I've seen a lot of Dolphin fans say that they wanted Chris Greer fired this week for not drafting Herbert. So that's ironic.
I think a lot of pendulum swinging over there.
Yes, very much so. Tara in here with another big super chat. She says, rough way to go out, but proud of this team. Made the playoffs in a rebuild year. This was such a wacky game. It really was a stupid, drunk game. We got everything today. I think 8 times out of 10, Herbert and the offense have a decent to good game. I just don't think this was a normal game.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people comparing it to the feeling of watching a college football game, which I think was accurate. There was just a lot of like weird stuff that you don't really see happen in a professional game most of the time, which was maybe indicative of a larger point, but probably not. I think it was a very weird game. I will say too, like obviously credit to the Texans for coming out with that defensive game plan. D'Amico Ryans continues to be one of the premier game planners in the sport on defense, and so got to give some credit to the other side, right? There's 2 teams in every game, but definitely a very weird game. Very Chargers-like to have the first ever defensive 2-point conversion in the NFL playoffs that's ever happened. Glad that we've made history in that respect as well. Very, very weird game overall.
So Gene Steratore was talking about that, and if I heard him correctly, if the ball had gone past the line of scrimmage, and come back, then Dicker batting it down would have been like that would have ended the play.
Yes, except for the fact Gene also mentioned that because Dicker batted it forward, technically it was a penalty for illegal batting because you can bat it laterally or backwards. But he did point out, he was like, that doesn't matter for this specific play. Yeah. It is a penalty. But yeah, if the ball had crossed the line of scrimmage and then like bounced along the ground back, then like Dicker like batting it out of bounds or whatever backwards would have been fine. But because it never actually crossed the line and then Dicker batted it down, it was still a live ball.
All right. There you go. You live and you learn. Crescendo in here says Herbert will win a Super Bowl. Right now, he isn't a big game winner. 2 all-time failures in his playoff appearances. Love him, but let's be honest. I think we kind of had this conversation. I would say the first game was way more about the coach than him, but today, yes, I think he deserves to be blamed for his performance today.
Yep.
Tara back with another one says, also Greg Roman, I'm gonna need you to stop calling plays short of the 6 on 4th downs. Yeah, that was a major issue this season. We didn't dive into a ton of the specifics from this game, but calling a whip route on 4th down to Quentin Johnston against Derek Stingley is one of the worst coaching play calls I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, hated that play. Was egregiously mad at my television about that play.
Yeah. And we've been very pro QJ, and he's taken a ton of positive steps, and it sucks that he played as poorly as he did today.
Yeah.
But that's not the player I'm going to on 4th down. And also calling 3 straight Gus Edwards runs before that play was also a choice that I'm not crazy about.
Yeah, I think 3rd or 4th down, you should have just sneaked it.
Yeah. 3rd or 4th downs on this team, it needs to go to JK. It needs to go to Ladd. That's probably it. Like that's where I'm going with the football 9 times out of 10. New Jersey Savage, I'm sad as hell about this. I wasn't too confident in the game, but I believed we could win. The defense was good, but Justin let us down today. I think that's fair, and I think that's how most of us were feeling. There was so much positivity heading into today that the way the game played out is definitely frustrating. It's definitely, I can understand why some people are going existential crisis mode today, because I get it. The way this game played out was not on my bingo card.
Yep.
Michael Murphy says, man, this offseason is going to be rough with the Herbert talk, cap space, and another Ortiz masterclass has me hopeful. Thanks for everything this season, boys, whether positive or negative. BTFU.
Thank you for being here for all of it.
Yeah, appreciate that. John says, who wants to know who plays right guard for this team next year? Don't think it's Jamari. Also can't justify Zion's fifth-year option.
Trey Smith, God willing. Yeah, I think the answer is a free agent of some kind.
Yeah.
Like we talked about.
Yeah, I would say Kevin Zeitler is probably like the worst case. And I know that's probably more of a short-term solution. But he still is significant. He's a significant upgrade even at his age. And he might retire. The Lions might go to the Super Bowl and he might just call it quits. But there's some good guards that the Chargers can go after in free agency that can be upgrades over Jamari, who I think should have been playing all year. I know he played poorly today, but he's going to be on the team next year, and he'll provide depth for the team next year too. Jacob says, love you guys. Sucks how this ended. Herbert and company do some soul searching and get back on that horse redemption in 2025, 2026. I think that's a great perspective. And yeah, again, nobody's going to feel worse about this game today than Justin Herbert is. I know that for a fact. So he is going to get after it in the offseason, but he is going to have to answer it for today.
Yep.
Armand, as much as I love alt/lad, this game had me wondering what Neighbors and Frazier/JPJ would have looked like. And I know he said in the conversation later that this was not a slight at lad. But I think the thing that I keep coming back to about this kind of conversation is what the Chargers would be doing at right tackle if they had this kind of outcome. It's a horrible, horrible draft for offensive tackles this upcoming year. Free agent offensive tackles never hit free agency. It's very difficult to find a legit upgrade. So if the Chargers had Frazier and JPJ instead of alt, we're probably having a conversation about re-signing Trey Pipkins again because there are no other options to be your right tackle going forward. So I get it. I know he's not sliding lad specifically. But the Chargers would be in a horrible situation at right tackle if they did not have Joe Alt on this team.
Yeah, I think all other things being equal, I think we're probably still having a pretty similar conversation because one of Will Anderson or Daniil Hunter probably would have killed Justin Herbert in this game.
Will Anderson nearly did anyways.
Yeah, without Alt at right tackle. Because I'm trying to think about like if we assume that Pipkins still gets injured, right, and doesn't play this game, I'm trying to think about like either Jamari Sawyer or Foster Sorrell would have been playing right tackle today if they didn't take Alt.
Yeah.
And that's not personally what I would have wanted. So, yeah, I think that it's probably still a similar conversation. I do get that, like, obviously there's going to be some kind of the Squidward meme of looking out the window at SpongeBob and Patrick having fun in the yard with this center class that just came out. I totally get that. And I think that, there is a legitimate conversation to be had. I know a couple of people asked me about that earlier this week about like, well, which center would have taken? And like, there's plenty of D3 guys that like.
There were so many last year.
Hunter North's just hanging out as Freed Humphrey's backup, man. Like, I don't know. He was a 5th round pick. He's not doing anything. Like,
Tanner Bordelini was a 6th rounder, and I would have loved it.
Yeah, like so I think it's a fair question to ask. I think it's reasonable. Again, like obviously with a tough loss and everything, you kind of go back and you question all the decisions that they've made, right? But like, I think ultimately, like with those 2 picks specifically, I think they're probably in a pretty similar spot as they were today.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree. Kyle Loomis with the next one here. Great season, Bolts. Hate the way it ended, but considering where we came from, there's a lot to be excited about. Thank you, Gak, for all you do. Love you, Charger fan. Bolt up, baby. Appreciate you, Kyle. Appreciate the positivity. Appreciate the super chats every single week. Really does mean a lot. Landon back in here. I love everyone in the chat from Doomer to Bloomer. Okay. We're all here because we effing love Charger football. Haven't been excited for a draft in a minute until now. Do you have a best case scenario for round 1 right now, Alex?
The best case scenario is that something tragic befalls Tyler Warren and he falls to the 21st pick. The best realistic scenario, I think, is probably Colston Loveland at this point. I think that, as we talked about earlier, makes the most sense just in terms of like the Chargers need a game changer at tight end, especially the way that this Greg Roman offense operates. Again, like we talked about, Roman is going to be back as offensive coordinator next year. I think that's kind of a foregone conclusion. I think if Loveland is gone, I would say the best case is probably Kenneth Grant. I really like him at defensive tackle. I think he adds pretty decent pass rush upside that the Chargers have been missing a little bit. I know Poona Ford gave that a little bit. T.R. Tart definitely provided it today. But I think if you want to start there, so very Michigan heavy once again. But as it turns out, this year at least, some of the takes last year about the Michigan guys I thought were a little bit silly. But this year, as it turns out, the Michigan guys happen to be at positions of need and are very good players. So I think it's probably the best case as of right now. But we'll get into it more.
Yeah, 100%. I watched one game of Kenneth Grant the other day, and it was Ohio State, and that man wrecked shit that game. So I have watched so many prospects already against Ohio State. It's insane. So I will be watching a lot of Ohio State tape this year. Blake sent a couple ones in here with a super sticker with nothing. And then second one, he says Lad's nickname should be White Lightning. We've seen a few nicknames for Lad. Like there's the Gladiator, there's Lididi, there's Lambo Lad. I think we just need to pick one. Do you have a favorite?
I kind of like Lambo Lad.
I like Lambo Lad the most too. Yeah,
that one is funny.
And he is fast, but he's definitely not a Lamborghini.
We could just keep calling him Alex Insdorf.
Yes. Derek says his favorite Lad player comp is Torrey Holt. Find the comparisons to random slow slots insulting. I agree with that part. I don't have enough recollection of Torrey Holt to say that.
My brain was not developed enough when Torrey Holt was playing football to remember if that's a good comparison or not.
Yeah. I do like the Steve Smith comparison that Jim Harbaugh made. Very similar stylistically in terms of being a smaller, undersized receiver, but the speed is there. The route running is there. Steve Smith obviously has a very different personality.
Yes.
But I do like that one. And I do also find the comparisons to Wes Welker and Julian Edelman to be insulting. Julian Edelman, I think, ran like a 4.65. Like, please.
Yeah.
Kyle also sent in another one here. Says, much love to Tyler and all the fans that made the trip to Houston. It does seem like there were a lot of fans who went, which is great. I love seeing that. Shitty game to attend in person, though.
Yeah, tough. Hope you at least enjoyed the city of Houston.
Yeah, it seems like a good food. It seems like a really good food town. So
yeah.
Sholoman says Siobhan Ravel or Kenneth Grant, 4'4", 320 pounds speed.
I assume the 4.4 is about Revel, and then the 320 pounds and speed is about Grant. Because Kenneth Grant's not running a 4.4, I can tell you that. But yeah, I think Revel is going to be a guy that I think the Chargers will do a decent amount of work on as well. For anyone not familiar, he's a corner out of East Carolina. He has not played a college football game since the end of September or beginning of October or so because he tore his ACL. But most people are expecting him to be back in full by around training camp, so he should be good, if not for OTAs. He is one of my favorite corners in the draft. Really bummed that he didn't get to finish out a full season this year, but will definitely be someone that we will cover extensively this offseason.
Yeah, I do think corner's a possibility in the first round if there are some, but it doesn't sound like there are some. So we'll see what happens there. Sean with a big super chat says, thank you, Steve and Alex, for jumping on after this game. I was spiraling down a dark hole, and this live session helps me. Well, you're very welcome. I'm glad you're not spiraling down a dark hole. And then he says, everyone needs to calm down. 11-6 this year was a successful season, only up from here.
The optimism is working.
It is working. We are doing our jobs. I am a school counselor for a reason. Cristiano Watkins says, this show gets me through the tough losses. Bolt up. We appreciate that one.
Glad to hear that.
Dre wants to know who is to blame on those back-to-back unblocked sacks. Giro. So the first one, I assume this is at like the second to last drive or the drive.
Yeah, I think that the two sacks right before the McConkey touchdown.
So the first one with Will Anderson, it looked like Joe Alt was sliding left and everybody else was sliding left, and then there was no back or tight end to pick up Will Anderson. So that's an execution error up front from a schematic standpoint, if you will. And then the second one, Zion is going left and Bradley Bozeman is going right, which has happened all season long. And you let a defensive tackle run right in between you guys. Neither of them picked him up. So communication issues happen way too often with this interior group, which, back in week 5, it's justifiable to a certain extent. We're in the playoff game, week 18, week 19 rather. It's completely inexcusable. So that to me is player execution, it's coaching, everything like that. The one against Will Anderson, I think, was just a bad call.
Yeah, I think the if you want to assign blame to somebody for the first one, I think it would probably be on whoever is calling the protection for that play, whether it's Herbert or Bozeman, for the kind of full slide left without someone on the backside to block Anderson. And even then, like, I don't necessarily love putting a back or a tight end on Will Anderson as it is. And then, the second one is just on the interior for that miscommunication probably. But
yeah, I agree. A Thier in here late. This was a horrible experience with Roman. I can't take it anymore. Herbert was bad. Play calling was ugly. I got news for you and everybody else.
Yeah.
He's not going anywhere.
Yep, he is not going anywhere. We will continue to be upset about it. I personally am not a fan of what we've gotten, but we will do what needs to be done next year.
Yeah. The Chargers will have better personnel next year to operate his offense, but yes, I have never been a huge fan of the Greg Roman offense in general.
Yep.
But he's best buds with the head coach, so I don't know what to tell you. New Jersey Savage with another one, but I do appreciate you guys coming on to do this live because I would have been too depressed to be up here for this long talking about this game. My cousin is a Chiefs fan and he won't stop calling me. That's brutal, man. That particular dynamic has got to be not very fun. I can tell you that.
Yep.
My brother is an Eagles fan like Alex Insdorf as well. And so, he's had a wonderful last few years because the team has been very, very good. Hopefully the Chargers will get there at some point.
Yep.
Bolt Boy Tommy, I can't go outside. I live in upstate New York. I guess I'll go outside and eat white dog shit. That's good. He says, go Bills from here on out. Yeah, go Bills. I do agree with that from here on out.
Yeah, I do agree. I picked the Bills to win the Super Bowl. I do love this Bills team. One of my best friends is a Bills fan, so gonna ride with her for the rest of the postseason. But yeah, I did say if you can go outside, if the weather is nice enough, go outside. If you can't, then I will say, one of the other things that I didn't talk about is, after a frustrating loss like this, especially, I'll always just boot up CFB or Madden or whatever I have and turn the settings down to rookie and just, beat the absolute tar out of the CPU. So if that helps you too, then you can do that if you're stuck inside in upstate New York right now.
Yeah, if you're stuck in the snow or the fires, definitely do not go outside. We are not encouraging that. Be safe and be outside if you can.
Yes.
Nick Skipper with our last one. Thank you guys for all your hard work. I appreciate everything you guys do. As always, looking forward to the off-season episodes. All right, already appreciate Nick. I've met him a couple of times now in person. He's a great fan of the team. He goes to all the activities. Was at the meetups the past couple of weeks after the road game. So Nick's a great dude. We appreciate him. And we appreciate the heck out of you guys. 34 super chats after a game like that. It definitely means a lot. Alex, I have news for you. Thomas Martinez challenging you to a dueling mock draft.
Let's do it. We'll get you. We'll do an episode. You can come on the show. We'll do one for Katz's Corner. Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it. And I do agree with Mr. Sorrow. Bills Lions. I need it.
Yes,
I need it.
Absolutely.
Matchup. All right. That is going to do it for us today. I was thinking initially that this would be kind of a quicker show, but it is what it is. You guys send in the super chats. We answer them. We appreciate it. It's been a fun season. Sucks that it ended this way, but we will have a lot of great content coming to you guys this off season. Your support throughout this 2024 season has truly meant the world. It's been a great time for us to interact with each of you, and it genuinely means a lot. All right, that's going to do it for us today. We'll see you guys next time, probably in a couple weeks, but there will be a next time. And as always, this has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We'll see you next time. Bolt up.